Howdy, folks. Wanted to talk today about autistic meltdowns and specifically the mechanism that is in my brain that I'm going to call the meltdown machine. Now, meltdowns are different than tantrums. Tantrums are thrown to get a certain outcome. So a kid throws a tantrum because they can't have a cookie, give them a cookie, they start behaving well. Meltdowns happen because of a system overwhelm, and the behaviors can look very similar, but the meltdowns don't stop if you give the person having the meltdown what they want. And that's the key difference. You might think that meltdowns are just something that happens to kids. Not true. Adults have them too. I have them. I've had 3 this week. They are no fun. They look a little more mature than what a kid might experience as a meltdown. And that's because I've learned what adult behavior is. And I do my best when having a meltdown to cope and still behave as well as I can. Autistic meltdown happens because your system gets overwhelmed, you get too much input, you can no longer cope with the world, you need to escape, you need to reset, you need to be comforted, you need to feel safe, you need to just leave the party, you need to stop having people talk to you, you need less stress in your life. Your system has reached its limit and you're done. Now, everybody has a system like that. We can all have a meltdown. The thing that distinguishes autistic meltdowns is that they just happen far more frequently than they do for someone without autism. And it really impacts their life. You know, you might just have too much of a day and just the day, the perfect storm as a neurotypical person, and act badly and yell at people or maybe yell at your coworkers or behave like a jerk. Folks with autism deal with meltdowns or the threat or fear of meltdowns on almost a daily basis. And that's what makes them so hard, because it's so disruptive to you just trying to live your life. My meltdowns typically look like getting angry or frustrated. I tend to talk a lot. What my brain is trying to do by talking a lot is control the situation, limit the input, and get back to a place where it can function. What it looks like to other people is dad is angry, dad is frustrated, Brian's behaving like a jerk. Why is he overreacting to this? It doesn't make any sense. The words he's saying don't compute. They don't make any sense for the situation. Why is he behaving like that? And that's just a typical description of one of my personal meltdowns. They run the gamut. They can be pretty mild and they can be really severe. They can last for 5 minutes and they can last for, a couple of days, which is not a lot of fun. In trying to understand my meltdowns and to be able to explain them to friends and family and to talk about it with my wife as we figure out how we can integrate this new understanding of autism into our life, the thought struck me of a meltdown machine. This won't be a perfect analogy, but the experience I have with meltdowns, as I have become more aware of what's actually happening, is that once I reach a certain tipping point, a certain trigger point, a certain level of input, then I am going to behave badly in certain predictable ways, and I don't have any control over it. No amount of willpower, no amount of, okay, we'll just do it your way, or okay, I'll stop bugging you, will stop the meltdown process that happens. The machine is just going to have its say. The machine is going to do its work. It's going to whir and clank and bang and spit out bad behavior no matter what, because the input is already reached that level and now it has to do its job. I can see the outside of the meltdown machine in the front part of my brain where I am conscious and aware and logical and rational. but I can't see all of the machine that's wired into the rest of my brain, because I only exist here in this front part of my brain, and that goes for all of us. That's where our consciousness is. And the subconscious and the animal brain and the lizard brain, or whatever you want to call it, all that stuff from evolution is all functioning without us being aware of it. So I can see like part of the machine up here, and then the rest of it is all back here in the older parts of my brain. And then the machine gets input from, lots of various places. Obviously from sight and sound and smell and touch. There's also a part of it, I think, that takes input from deeper in my brain, kind of in the memory, fight or flight, creativity, like that whole, probably near the hippocampus. I'm not a neuroscientist, but somewhere in there that does good work for us and spits out input, but also sends us into action before we are aware that the action is taking place. Somewhere in that part of my brain is also an input for this machine. And the machine that I can see has levers and dials and buttons and gauges and a certain amount of controls on it. I can fine tune it. I can kind of direct it. I can manage the machine most times. But the machine isn't quite designed properly, because the machine can be overloaded well beyond the capacity of the controls I have access to. So you can dump far more into the machine than the controls and the conscious part of my brain can handle or take care of or respond to. I think that's bad design. It would be nice if we could figure out why evolution has designed the meltdown machine that way in autistic folks and neurodivergent folks. It would help with self-esteem and self-worth and understanding for the rest of humanity. We're not there yet. So what that means is I go along throughout my day, the machine is getting input, I am paying attention to dials and readouts and gauges, I am pulling levers and pushing buttons. If I need to go to high stress situations, I'm far more in tune with the levers, and I can kind of pre-stage some things sometimes. That would be called masking. And overall, like, the system works. Most times I can pull the right levers, twist the dials, and manage the machine. And the output of the machine is good behavior. And no one knows the difference. And I feel successful because I navigated the day well. And other times things don't go as well. And I have plenty of complaints about this meltdown machine, and one of them is the early warning system on the machine sucks. I would go so far as to say there is no indication of approaching meltdown level on the machine. There's no warning light, there's no buzzer, there's no gauge that ramps up from green to yellow to red. There's, no pressure gauge. There's no indication of how much volume of input is coming in that you can adjust for. The meltdown machine has no such indicators, or they're not good enough. There's a part of me that wants to say, well, I just can't read it well enough. But I've got 45 years of trying to behave well, even, not knowing about autism until a year ago. And you would think I'd have figured it out by now. You would think other folks would have figured it out by now and made YouTube videos about how to do it. I haven't seen any of those. I know there's lots of ways to cope ahead of time and plan, but as far as an indicator in your brain like, hey, it's about to get bad, you need to back off, I haven't seen anybody talk about that kind of a mechanism. Would be nice. So then a meltdown happens. The machine does its overload protocol. It runs its overload routine. It outputs bad behavior. And all of that starts. The machine starts clunking and hissing steam and making grumbly noises before any of the gauges, before any of the dials, before any of the monitoring system indicates that you're about to output bad behavior. And that's pretty demoralizing, pretty frustrating, pretty sad. It's hard. It's very hard. Once the meltdown machine has started, all I can do is a little bit of input, dials and levers, try to minimize things. I can rely on other people who have been informed of the meltdown machine to try to help me once the machine starts going. But the reality is the machine is going to run its course. It is going to run its program. It is going to output bad behavior, and you have to let it. If you stop it, which I did for a lot of years, that's the masking, gotta behave well, gotta stuff it down inside, got to keep your military bearing, for example, have to be a good boy, don't want to be a jerk in a social situation. That output doesn't go away. It will come out at a later date. I have found my ability to suppress that stuff and keep it until a later time to be rapidly diminishing in the last couple of years. And anymore, I don't want to go through that, tamp it down and deal with it later, because the output just gets to ferment and rot and get more explosive. I would much rather, as painful as it is, I would much rather get it out. As soon as the machine starts outputting bad behavior, heck with it. Let's get it out, full steam ahead, dump everything, rev the machine up, let's get it all out so that we can get back to homeostasis, back to good behavior, back to a place I and you want me to be. And so that's saying that I don't have control over my meltdowns. I don't have control over the meltdown machine. Not much, anyway. Not as much as I would like, not as much as the people around me would like me to have. And that's tough. That's hard. It's awful. I haven't given up on trying to manage and run the meltdown machine. I haven't abandoned my post in my brain. I am still committed to being the best person I can. I shy away from blaming people around me for the bad behavior output of the meltdown machine. I try to have honest conversations about what led to the meltdown. Part of that can be, the way to say it is, there is plenty of blame to go around. There's blame for other people, there's blame for me. But talking about blame doesn't really get you anywhere. So I try to have honest conversations about what led to the meltdown and figure out what, if anything, can be done for the future. The reality is, you can't have 4 million rules for your life. As much as I like structure and order, and that helps keep the meltdown machine in good output, that doesn't work for life, and that doesn't work for most other people around me. And it's that rigid structure is very controlling and damages relationships. So sometimes I just accept that, yeah, had a meltdown and it sucked. I am not happy about it. I am not excusing it, but I am also just accepting that it happened and why it happened. And also changed my focus to, there's nothing I need to do. Let's just let it be, fix what we can fix, and move on. The love and forgiveness thing, self-love and self-forgiveness is critical here. So that's what I've figured out about my autistic meltdowns. I'm calling it the meltdown machine. That's the best I'm able to articulate it at this point. What do you think about the meltdown machine? What's your experience with autistic meltdowns, either for yourself or those around you? Let me know down in the comments. I hope that maybe this picture of a meltdown machine, this description, can help you understand what's going on for neurodivergent folks a little better. Take care. Remember, hope is a choice.